Good morning and welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners agenda setting for Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. It's 9:02 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Vice Chair of the Board. The Chair, Commissioner Mejia, is excused this morning. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards, County Manager Amir. We're here till noon. There'll be a midpoint break. And, public virtual attendance can follow along on Thurston County YouTube channel. Start as usual with item 1, homeless strategies update. Keely Marino from Public Health and Social Services. Good morning, Keely.
Good morning, Commissioners. Keely Marino with Public Health and Social Services. A very brief update for you today. Just a recap on the hazardous weather event that was declared about 2 weeks ago. There were a total of 195 beds, and again, that's averaging 24 individuals per night. So, averaging 20. The average was 24 single adults without or couples without children that stayed at the pop-up shelter at Sergio's place at 444 Martin Way. So very successful, first time using that facility, and the numbers were up where they would have been had it been down at First Christian Church. So just really appreciative that Interfaith Works could stand up that shelter for 8 days straight, which is a real stretch for our shelter providers when the workforce has been so stressed lately, and staffing can be a real. Just really appreciate their efforts. Other than that, a request for proposals for all homeless services, as well as some affordable housing projects. On the about a week and a half ago, we're moving forward with getting ready to review through our new advisory boards the applications that come in. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't have any questions.
Maybe for the county manager, we've heard part of that right-of-way package was, the motel, I guess you call it. But Franz Anderson was also part of that package. Is there any updates on that? I've heard updates on the one piece, but I haven't heard anything on Franz Anderson just recently.
Yeah, in Franz Anderson, I believe the permitting process to accommodate the tiny village is through Olympia, and they expect to have that online, I believe, by June, July. That's the time frame that I expected. So, but I can't remember the number of tiny homes that are going to be. Do you know the number, Keely?
Yes, they're planning for 50, and they're releasing a request for proposals this month for an operator of the village that will go up.
So that really is going to be significant, and that has been funded directly by the right-of-way initiative by the state.
Okay. I'll throw this piece of update out. I attended that house, they call it House Washington.
Yeah,
Not really
true.
sure what it's about, but I'm not really sure what the title's about. But it's about kind of a group of interested stakeholders to track legislative activity regarding housing. And so the big topic yesterday was the governor's referendum package, where he was proposing, maxing out bond capability of the state in order to do a, really huge, affordable housing construction type of effort. The update there was that the Senate seemed skeptical, I guess was they were saying, and was being resistant. The House was working on on what the funding mechanism would be. The bonds I wrote most attractive option in quotes. There's looking at permutations, like spreading it out over more years, or they're trying to mitigate any effect on the state's bond rating. So looking at different ways they could structure it timing wise so that it wouldn't have that effect. Meanwhile, another proposal is a REIT oriented proposal, which I think Representative Chop is like promulgating. But then of course that has unwanted effects on commercial and multifamily housing projects, construction, because I guess that would, I'm not sure how they're targeting the REIT, but those are the two main funding mechanisms for this that the House are working on. Meanwhile, the Senate is just trying to get its hands around it altogether. But they did say it had second life. I guess at one point it looked like it wasn't gonna go anywhere, and now it's kind of back being debated and worked on and massaged, so,
Because it's part of the budget.
yeah.
And also, I think how it had a Renew Energy is based on the Department of Commerce report on the need for housing across the state in the next 15 years. And it's just an incredible amount of housing needs that we have, both affordable or not. And I believe, if I recall well, the state needs to build close to 25,000 units a year. I don't know, for the next 10, 15 years, I can remember the timeframe, just to keep up with the demand. And also, there is a couple bills, they really keys on affordable housing, they have been tracking that is aligned to this particular funding. Yeah, so I think that's probably my 2 cents as to what has renewed legs on this particular efforts, I believe, because of the Department of Commerce report. I think they released that midweek last week.
Yeah, they went through a few other bills, but transitory development bill, I guess, moved forward. He said there's been a lot of controversy over the missing middle. I call it that, but it's more like about changing single-family zoning along transit corridors, I guess is what they're focused on, rather than across the board, which was, I think, last year's proposal, or some other places have done, but looking at doing that along transit corridors. Very controversial still, and lots of back and forth ongoing on that bill. And then there's a couple regarding rent stabilization or having to give 12 months notice for certain size rent increases, and he said it's unclear that they'll move forward. Those are kind of stalled. So that was that update. Keely, anything else?
Commissioner Edwards.
Commissioner Edwards.
I guess I'd just ask, where are we at on that ADU bill for, building? Is that kind of gonna make it easier for?
Yeah, I'll give you, I'll give you.
We'll get that in the legislation?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, that wasn't discussed in my thing, so I'll leave it to the committee.
Have a
Thank you,
couple-
Keely.
Yeah.
Let's write these notes down about your Franz Anderson update. Okay, that'll bring us to item 2, reviewing this afternoon's draft agenda. And we will call the order at 2 p.m. Pledge of allegiance to be led by Commissioner Edwards. We have approval of agenda, opportunity for public to address the board, county manager's update. Anything to be said?
I don't have any specific updates based on the public testimony that you received last Tuesday.
Okay. Consent items, we have 5, A through E. 3A is emergency services. Move to approve changes to, let's see, council bylaws. I'll just,
Thank you. You reviewed this item, Commissioner. And the EMS Council voted unanimously to change the bylaws. And there's a specific change on Article 4, Section 4.1C. And it strikes the word "for," meaning the number 4, and just leaves the citizen at large appointments by the Board of County Commissioners. And that is really and it also outlines for one representative for each commissioner district. And that's really in alignment to be in the position to, for the 5 commissions that are coming up next year. That's really the genesis of this small change.
Commissioner Edwards, anything?
Thank you.
Okay. I don't either. Let's go to item 3B, reappointment to Board of Equalization.
Yeah, Commissioners, you discussed this particular appointment for your consideration this afternoon will be to reappoint Mr. Robert Hastings to the Board of Equalization for a 3-year term. They will expire on February 28, 2026.
No question.
3C, reappointment to the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Committee.
For you, also a reappointment for your consideration of Ms. Priscilla Terry to the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Committee, which term will expire on December 31st, 2025.
And that's just extend that. We also have item 3D, which is an appointment to Treatment Sales Tax.
And for you to consider appointing Mr. Ali Abed to the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Committee for a term expiration of December 31st, 2025. And this is a brand new appointment, by the way. to the TST.
3E is also a treatment sales
And
tax.
also a new appointment for Ms. Rachel Drion to the Treatment Sales Tax Advisory Committee, also with expiration date of December 31st, 2025. And again, those items are following the discussion the board had and provide direction to bring this item for final consideration.
Okay. That covers consent calendar. Then item 4A is auditor item for the voucher list.
Thank you, Commissioner. For your consideration will be for you to approve the voucher list of the week, February 13, 2023, for a combined amount of $1,078,408.47. This particular items on the department's item, not in the consent agenda because there are some remnant expenditures related to the tenant improvements. Also includes in this is the ongoing payments of the lease, the building, as well as the parking lots that we carry that as part of the ongoing lease. But I believe the desire is to have this item on the department when we're still having those items related to the tenant improvements of the atrium itself. So there's still small items on that. The question that I have is, considering that Commissioner Mejia perhaps may not be attending this afternoon, would you like to move this to next week, or what would be the desire of the board?
My question is the time frame issue. Is it pressing one way or the other? That, I mean, is a week more going to hurt anything?
Probably not.
Okay.
So sounds like we should probably move it till next week.
Just in case.
So could I suggest something? If I think Commissioner Mejia is going to make an attempt to come to the afternoon meeting, and if she's not here, maybe I ask you to amend the
Strike it.
agenda.
Okay,
At that time, will that work?
that would work for me.
Yeah, that works. If Commissioner Mejia's, I'm looking at Sarah, if she's got limited time or limited capacity, I think it'd be better for her to zoom into the SMP, frankly, than just try to make it this meeting in person, because there really is for so little on the agenda, but obviously it's her call. But, okay, well, we can keep it there, and if not, we'll remove it and it'll go to the 14th.
I will propose an amendment to the agenda for you to consider.
Item 5A is Public Health and Social Services. Set public hearing for HUD Consolidated Plan, Needs Analysis, and Assessment of Fair Housing.
Thank you. You also reviewed this item last week as a requirement of funding the Thurston County received from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, as the federal government. Thurston County must prepare and submit a consolidated plan that describes the affordable housing and community development needs in the county and identifies priority categories for funding. This plan has a coverage of 5 years, which is from 2023 to 2027. One of the first steps that the board needs to take is to set a public hearing where you will be receiving public testimony on the concept at this point. Depending on the public testimony you will receive, there will be a second public hearing, most likely in June 2023, when we have all the items completed and the priorities put in place. And at that point, as you will make a final determination and moving forward with the plan. And again, this is the first step, and for your consideration to set a public hearing April 18, 2023 at 3:30 in the afternoon here in this building. Tom?
Just to add to this, in addition to the consolidated plan, there's really two parts of this. One is the needs assessment that informs the consolidated plan, and the other is assessment of fair housing. So we've been working with the City of Olympia and the Housing Authority of Thurston County to develop this assessment of fair housing that is also required. So they're two separate but related items for this public hearing, but happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Tom?
Tom, on this needs assessment, was there anything in there that could help us prioritize local individuals that have fallen on hard times? Is there anything at all that might indicate who's from elsewhere and who's from here?
It does not get into that level of detail. It's a fairly high level. So we use a lot of data from TRPC, the HUD census, and we did do a community survey. So, but it's a pretty high level identification of needs. It does not get into the specifics of individuals and their circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
We'll have standing items then, and that will be that for this afternoon. Short meeting, public can be aware. Bring your public comment if you have it, but the idea was to keep this pretty short rather than cancel it because there might be public comment and we've got a work session then afterwards regarding shoreline master plan. That'll bring us to review of next week's agenda, which looks pretty trim as well. We'll call that meeting to order at 2:00. I will be leading Pledge of Allegiance. We'll look at the proposed agenda. Opportunity for public to address the board county manager's update per usual. One consent item, which is a human resources item, resolution for classification.
Thank you, sir. There may be an additional item that you will see on your agenda next week. So the item that you have right now is related to the briefing back in 2022 in the June timeframe. With Robin presented the overall reorganization of the duties related to central services, facilities, and everything else that she's in charge of. Through that process, there have been many steps that we have taken, and this is the last step in the process related to this reorganization is to create this new classification, which is the Capital Project Planning Manager. And the Capital Project Planning Manager will be in charge of managing the overall portfolio of the projects that we have outlined in our program related to facilities. This particular classification has a salary range from $393 to $9,857. There is not a request for additional budget on this. This is already included on your budget. These administrative steps that we need to take. It has taken us a little while to determine what the specific classification, job description of this classification is. And here we are, taking the next step. And Robin is here to answer any questions, and maybe Maria is here to answer any questions. She was listening.
You good time, Miria. That was like right on cue.
She was listening.
Yes, just monitoring.
Okay, well, I'll start with Robin. Anything you want to add?
I think that Romero covered it very well. I think that this is an important position for the county. In that this person will be responsible for developing a long-term, as in 20 to 40-year plan for county facilities, addressing space needs, identifying funding sources, and then an execution plan of how to achieve that, the goals that are set in that plan. So in addition to supervising all of the capital facility projects within central services. So. Much
Anything,
needed.
Maria?
The only thing, did you clarify, it's actually in the MDP pay plan and not?
Yeah,
the
it is. Yeah, thank you. This is not in the at-will plan. It will
Right.
be on the MTP plan that will be
Yeah, so
available free.
it's corrected in the materials. I just didn't get it to Jamie on time to correct the paperwork.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I have a question on the budget that this is gonna come out of.
It's part of the central services budget, so it's through indirect rates. So a portion of it is general fund, but the majority is other funds throughout the county.
I guess that's my question is, oftentimes when we're faced with these issues of budget, where it's coming from, it's about a 60-40 split with general fund carrying the most. And you think this one is gonna be opposite of that? So
No, it's gonna be
it's gonna be
roughly half and
60-40.
half. Yep, it's based on square footage of our buildings, and the vast majority of our buildings are occupied by offices and departments that are paid out of general fund. So I'd say roughly half of it will be from general fund, but I will also say this is a reclassification of an existing position. So the bulk of it is already funded through internal service rates, and it's just the increase in cost that will be a new expense in the county budget.
And to clarify that point, we're establishing the position, and then the next step will be to do the reclassification of the existing FTE. So this is a two-step plan.
It's kind of confusing. I thought we were creating a new position.
No new position. new
Classification, but it is not a new
No.
position. I've had a vacant position, I've held it vacant to reclass. This, as Maria said, this establishes the classification because it's a new classification that the county doesn't have today. And that's what it's taken so long to get it in place.
Again, this is next week. It isn't like we can't, I guess, adjust something if we needed to, but my question is, we're gonna be discussing the difference between 50 million and 82 million or something, I believe, maybe even later today.
For the capital campus project, yeah.
Yes. And does this hinge on the outcome of that discussion to a degree?
No, this is not connected to that whatsoever.
Okay. Could I get the change then, and you're changing it from what to what? Because I was looking at it from a.
So that's a brand new classification.
So
That's step one. So it doesn't exist today, and so I worked with staff to create that. The next step is to take an existing FTE in facilities
It's a tech position.
and reclassify that FTE. And that.
So it's still only gonna be a bump up from what is
Current
allowed,
cost,
right?
yes.
Right. So that's a good clarification. This action, you are not creating a brand new position.
But
It's
that's
just-
coming down the road, provided we move ahead on this.
While you move ahead, the next step, as Robin and Maria stated, you just reclassified an existing position.
How much is the bump gonna be? Just give me that. I think you mentioned it.
Get that for you. I don't have that
I don't have
handy.
that.
I had a higher level position to swap out, but we ended up needing that, so it's, it certainly doesn't double the pay, but it's a bump.
When we go over it, maybe next
Yes,
week.
when that step comes, we will absolutely have that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so after we do this, we'll be doing another item, which will be to change the, okay,
Right.
at some point in the future.
And this is part of the restructure plan for central services that the board reviewed a year ago. It's taken that long to establish this new classification.
And it was the final step in
Yeah.
that.
That's the
Yeah,
final
it's the
step.
last step in the reorg for central services.
We can't just do them at the same time.
I don't think that will be pretty, I mean, we can probably bring, I don't know if Maria will be ready for next week to bring the reclassification. And we just probably place that in order.
I'm just thinking cause then we have to, if it's, explain all this all over again so that we remember and the public knows, like, it's easier to just do them and together.
Looking to get the position established by resolution and then do the reclassification, but
Like
I
Commissioner
can,
Messer said, if the board considers approving the creation of this classification, the next item will be the reclassification to follow.
well, I can submit.
And that may be a better conversation to have overall, I think, good point.
Connects dots better for us.
I guess Maria, you mentioned that we were going to, through resolution, create a new position now, so.
Creates a new classification.
The classification structure is approved by
Okay,
the
so
board.
it's not a new,
It's not a new
It's not a new FTE, it's
Okay,
not
that
a new
just threw me
position.
off.
Yeah.
It's the
Okay, good enough.
classification that's
hard to
right.
keep track of it all.
The county currently does not have a capital project planning manager.
That's not
Doesn't
one of the
exist.
people up here now that we see once in a
I
while.
never had one
So
of the.
let me take you back to a couple of steps that you've taken similar to this
Oh,
step. A couple of years ago, you established positions, an assistant director position. You established that position. and the departments found a vacant position they can reclassify to the new created position. So when you didn't create a new position, you created a new classification. So the Department of Health and the Department of Public Works had two vacant positions. And the next step was for you to reclassify an existing position into the new classification. So it was a net zero in terms of creating new positions. It's similar to what we're proposing to do.
Confusion is the word position, and you just used it in two different senses
yeah,
in
yeah.
that sentence.
Classification and position.
FTE might be clearer, right? The FTE.
I will make sure that next week I don't confuse you.
All right, good to go then forward. All right, let's look at, thank you,
So
Maria.
before you go, so for next week, you will see on this particular item, they will change the at-will positions and NTP. Then you will have another item for your consideration to reclassify an existing position into this new classification. And the other item that you will see is moving the one paramedic program manager, and that is Ben's old position, into the at-will plan. There is no changes on classification, there's only changes in title, and we move into the at-will position with no changes in salary.
You're saying that's gonna be a new
A
item,
new item, that just give you, so potentially we'll have 3 items in
HR
your
related.
consented agenda next week. Because at this point, what we have seen is very difficult, it has been extremely difficult to find the replacement for Ben on his position. Changing the title to Medic One Paramedic Program Manager is gonna give us a little more tools, and also have an at-will position. Will give us a little more flexibility in the recruitment process. That is the intent as to why we'll bring this item for your consideration next week.
I do have a question on that. Does the EMS Council have anything to do with this particular position? Okay.
So concluding, 3 HR items on your consent agenda so far this next week.
Can you just spell it out for me? What is the at-will allows us to do?
Yeah.
that's-
So on the at-will plan, the board changed the at-will plan that allows for a hiring bonus for those positions within the at-will plan. This will help the recruitment on that effort, because under the MTP, we don't have our recruitment tools. We're working with Maria to bring somewhat of a recruitment and retention element outside of the at-will positions. So that is coming later. And this action is really gonna help on the recruitment process.
But you said, I think you already said it, but the pay range doesn't. affect
Doesn't
it.
change that, no changes. And the job description itself does not change either.
When you get that process in place that you're working with Maria on, someday I hope we're going to get out of this situation where we have to bribe people to come to work someday. And are we gonna
No,
have-
it's incentives, we're no
I know,
private.
incentives and retention and recruiting. Would you put an end date on that process, just so we can have some kind of a review later on if the economy changes? I just wonder if that isn't something worth doing, that's all, so we aren't kind of open-ended on, because it'll be all at will, right? It'll be all at-will
The at-will
positions.
positions are very specific. There is no all of them. It's only a few positions that are considered at-will.
Well, yes, I realize that, but we can only use this process for the at-will
Yeah,
positions,
and
right?
I'm working with Maria to bring another set of policies related to recruitment and retention beyond the at-will positions.
Okay, well, more to come later, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll have the
Thank you, Maria.
4A voucher list And there might be 2 voucher lists depending on.
Maybe to voucher list this particular item for next week. If nothing changes from today's agenda, is for you to consider approving the voucher list for February 20th, 2023 for a combined amount of $2,434,776.48. And this does include small payments related to the tenant improvements here at the atrium. But also includes perhaps the ongoing payments of lease of the building and lease of the parking lots.
At some point, I want to be able to get back to some normalcy on this topic. Are we getting closer?
I think we're getting pretty close. So how about it for next week? I'll give you a little more detail as to what the elements include on this 2.4 million, just to give you the sense of magnitude. Would that work?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to get to the bottom of it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Item 5A is Emergency Services Child Care Action Council Services Agreement.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is not in the board review, maybe a couple of months ago. And the gist of this is to have a contract with the Child Care Action Council for Safe Kids Coalition. They find activities that related to ensure availability and discounted helmets to childcare facilities and family medical practices, provide support technicians to check car seats, provide car seats for low-income family in Thurston County, collaborate on fire safety outreach with local departments, collaborative and local medical stakeholders on infant and home safety programs. When the board reviewed this particular item, it was a suggestion that perhaps this contract needs to include translation services, which at that time was not included. So this contract does include translation services in Korean, Spanish, and Vietnamese, depending on the intended audience as possible. So that was the last item. I worked with Ben. Ben has worked with the Child Care Action Council to include those as part of the contract. So this is coming back to you for your consideration. This is a 3-year agreement, and the annual compensation is $42,501 for a total compensation over the 3 years of $127,503. And this is already included on the budget and is coming from Medic One funding. Ben?
I think that was a wonderful description. I will also remind you that it's built into the 2023 budget and will be built into the biennium as well in 24 and 25.
Ben, we're running into some budgetary issues in EMS. And that's where this money is coming from. Is there no other source, Traffic Safety Commission, I don't know, somewhere else that we could get this besides? You know, I'm just trying to think ahead if we run, depending on what kind of solution we come up with on the.
Absolutely, Commissioner. In terms of other funding sources, this is specific to EMS or preventative medicine, if you will, within Thurston County and is best associated with the fire departments. I would say that this is also, I want to be clear that this is built into the current projections. And so this isn't exceeding any current projections that are made for the Medic One levy. And I think that's important to remember.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I kind of had the same questions, Commissioner Edwards, and I'm just, I guess I don't understand that last statement. We said it's built into the projections of the Medic One levy, but I thought the whole issue was the projections of the Medic One levy are now up in the air based on the issue that was presented to us previously.
So in terms of what the ongoing projections are for the Medic One levy, we're looking at a variety of different components that we can address in terms of our budgeting, both now and into the 24-25 biennium and into the future. And yes, that is accurate. However, in terms of what Medic One strives to support within the community, those core functions, I believe that this would be designated as one of those core functions that we need to continue to promote within the community. A variety of funding sources will be evaluated moving forward, especially when we're looking at budget projections into the future. But for this specific contract, I will say that this is, in terms of a core function of Medic One, I believe that the prevention, especially associated with pediatric related injuries, is something that we should strive to support and maintain, but we will be looking for additional funding sources down the road.
So it sounds like you're saying that if we got to a point where something had to be on the chopping block, this would not be on the chopping block because it's too connected to core services.
This would be further down the list. Let me say that. In terms of a reevaluation, I don't want to put in a specific bin, touchable, not touchable. But I would say in terms of priorities, prioritizing pediatric safety in our community, I think should be one of the core tenets.
Good, Commissioner?
Yeah, I think there's more to come on it, so I have no point in muddying it up right now. Thank you.
Yeah, the issues related to the, to the levy of Medic One. That will be certainly a robust conversation with the board later in the year as a result of the biennial budget. 2023 is manageable, but I think looking to the future, how we're gonna be managing the shortcomings is gonna be critical.
And I guess, could you explain for the public the why on this? There's some differentiation between what we voted on and the attorneys and
Oh, no.
the assessor
There
and-
is no differentiation between what was voted on and what we're doing. The ballot measure has been implemented exactly as legally required. And so I know that Medic One is concerned that the millage rate, the rate per thousand in property value, is decreasing as property values increase, but the levy itself is increasing by 7%, which is exactly what the voters voted on, plus new construction, plus the refund. So where the general fund, conservation futures, and road fund levies go up by 1%, Medic One is increasing by 7%, and that's what was voted on. And so even though the levy rate is going down, and you've seen the charts I've shown you, as value goes up, the rate goes down. If the value was going down, the rate would go up. Even though the rate is going down, Medic One is collecting significantly more in their levy than they would have had they been limited by the 1%.
But to answer your question, Commissioner, and if I may, I think there was an assumption last year that, for instance, in 2023, we will be receiving 37 cents per 1,000 valuation.
35 cents is the maximum.
Yeah, so, and then, in the levy rate, over the last 5 years, I think it was going up to 50 cents per 1,000. That was the assumption. So, on the budget projections that you're talking about and Ben is talking about. So this year, we landed on 30 cents per 1,000 valuation, which created that gap. And in the future, in the next 5 years, based on the percentage rate increase that Robin stated, we will not be able to reach that 50 cents per 1,000. It's going to be less than. So it has an impact on the projections of the fund in the upcoming years. Whether there's an opportunity for the board to consider having a clarification by the voters related to that, that's something that needs to be discussed. But the point that I'm trying to make is conversations in the upcoming biennial budget is because the projections made last year are not materializing in terms of the revenues the Medic One is receiving. If that makes sense.
It's not being applied the way I mean, we drafted it to say what we wanted it to do, but we were talked out of that wording. And it was clear what we wanted to do, so we were encouraged to adopt a different wording that now is not doing what we intended it to do, when it was very clear we didn't change our intent, we just wanted the wording of the ballot measure to meet the intent of what the goal was to be accomplished.
So which would have, you weren't just discouraged from doing that, it would have been illegal to structure
Okay.
what the committee wanted.
But then, it's not the time or place,
I
but
think I think it requires further conversation. You're right. I don't think this is the time, the right time to have that conversation. I think we need to have more time to have the conversations, going back to the sequence of events that occurred. An initial ballot proposition, how the State Department of Revenue was involved and everything is. I think it will be good to have that historical perspective. Yeah, the assumption versus the actual created the gap.
Right. It's unfortunate that the staff in Medic One did not understand how the property levy works.
Well, I wouldn't state that.
Yeah, I don't know that
I-
either.
Stated exactly that way.
Well, I wouldn't get to that point. I think it was, I think further conversation requires on this.
There was the Attorney General's office that was advising us, Commerce was advising us somehow.
Department of Revenue.
Department of
The Department of Revenue governs
Interjected
property
something
tax.
in on this. I'm curious if there isn't a problem. I guess, is there an agency or something? Is it Department of Revenue? Is it the assessor? I mean, where does the problem lie on this? That's all I wanted. That was my simple question.
Yeah,
It's here, there.
I don't want to characterize it as a
Problem.
problem. I think it's really is how the intent versus the actual created this gap in funding. And I think
the
is
explanation of the actual is the problem.
Yeah.
If there's at least that problem. There may be other problems, but I can promise you there was at least that problem, because I was at the meeting when Department of Revenue officials were saying, they didn't say that, they said you can't do what you're trying to do.
Right.
But they didn't clarify that to do what we think you need to do is gonna be a totally different funding calculation. That was not communicated. It was just formulated as the better way to do exactly what you're trying to do, essentially. It wasn't what we were trying to do. It was something totally different. So the communication gap, that's at least one problem. There may be others.
More to come, I guess. 'Cause we
yeah,
never get
more to
settled
come
here
on this,
today.
certainly.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we go to 6, Public Works, resolution appointing acting county road engineer.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. As you know, Scott Lindblom, the current county engineer, has provided his resignation, which will be effective March 16, 2023. Under RCW 3680, as well as the Washington State Administrative Code 136-12-030, the legislative authority needs to take a formal action to even appoint an interim county engineer while we go through the process of advertising this position and selecting the new county engineer, which at that point, the board will need to take a formal action also in appointing the new county engineer. This position is very interesting how it's outlined and defined in the state law. So this particular resolution is for you to appointing Matt Anselman to serve as the acting Thurston County Road Engineer for the period not to exceed 6 months. And this can be shortened if we're successful in finding a permanent county engineer. It is a requirement under the statute that anybody who serves in the position as a county engineer, both in an interim and a permanent basis, needs to be a licensed, registered civil engineer. Matt Hasselman meets that criteria, and also he meets the criteria of experience that he has gained here in the department. So Karen Weiss is here to answer any questions related to this request.
No questions.
So you used several times the term county engineer, and that's what I've always said, but here it says county road engineer. Is that,
That's the actual name in the statute.
we always say
It's-
county engineer.
It's one of the same.
So this particular, I've been asked several times about this, like, what are the qualifications and what, and I said that they deal a lot with transportation and roads, but I think it's broader than that, but it sounds like maybe it's not broader than that. Was Scott's job more?
So
confined to
the
roads?
position itself, as identified by the statute, is the county engineers will deals with county roads. But you administratively, you can assign other functions to the county engineer, stormwater, and everything else. So that is not unusual, but this position
Like he was
itself.
involved in our conversation about Country Club
Yeah,
Road.
absolutely. He is part of all that. That's additional functions that is being added to the position itself. But the position outlined on the statute is county road engineer, and the specific function is to manage all the roadways in every county.
Well, I mean, we're covered here, cause Matt, I know it deals with the roads and so, I mean, that's great. I'm not questioning this item, I'm more looking to like the recruitment of like, what are we looking for and what are the qualifications for who we need to hire? It sounds like,
So there's more duties assigned to the county engineer and the position of Thurston County.
Karen, anything you want to add?
No, Romero's stating it very well, right? We, as a public works department, since we have so many different lines of businesses and activities, we do in the county road engineer position, look for other functions to be assigned to do some of that cross-divisional planning, right? Bring synergies between our projects and some of the other lines of business that we have. So we have the roads and transportation, but also the stormwater, and look for some of those connectivities and in our work. And that will be a part of our recruitment process.
Other duties assigned, I guess, right?
Here in Thurston County, yes.
All right, thank you. Then we will potentially approve Matt Enzelman to serve as acting county road engineer. Next is right-of-way vacation in the plat of Boston Harbor. Citizens here.
And this, let me take you back to May 2021. And this is when the public hearing was held on the proposed vacation of a 20-foot segment of right-of-way along 76th Avenue in Olympia, Northeast Olympia. The hearing examiners determined that it was meet the criteria to move forward in the vacation of this property. And that same year, the board passed resolution 1605, which adopted the recommendations by the hearing examiners on approving this vacation. As you may recall, under the Thurston County Code 1336030, which is embedded under resolution 16065, has a condition the staff needs to go through before is vacated to get the actual compensation amount of this strip or right away. That step has been completed, and we have received a compensation of $10,056 for this particular vacation. So this is the last step in the process on the vacation process, correct? Craig, anything to add?
I have nothing to add. Thank you. That was a good explanation.
Boy, it's frustrating how long it can take and
Yeah.
how much it can cost. But I guess no questions. Thank you, Greg.
Okay,
Thank you.
standing items then, and we'll move to Board of Health. Again, we're talking about next Tuesday, March 14th. So let's turn to Board of Health. Proposed agenda. Just review. Let's see. That meeting will call to order at 4:30. Look at the agenda, opportunity for public to address the Board of Health up front, and then we'll have a proclamation for International Transgender Visibility Day. With the Board of Health, anything we need to know about that?
I'm currently, I have reached out to a couple of local organizations. I've reached out to a couple of local organizations, and I'm still waiting for confirmation that we have one available to come and accept that day. But I'm currently working on it.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards. Did you have some?
No.
Oh. Sorry, I called on you.
No, that's what I thought your hand raised. I was just waiting
Well,
for
I
the
was
question.
kind of like, no, I'm good.
Okay,
I didn't
all
even
right.
ask, I was trying to get ahead of it.
All right,
Sorry,
very
I
good.
couldn't do that.
Next is item 4, opioid and fentanyl epidemic update. And it looks like we've got David Baines here, Public Health Social Services Director and our administrator. Looks like we've got coroner, prosecuting attorney, and sheriff representatives or the elected officials themselves lined up to give us update on the various aspects of this crisis, which obviously is, we hear more and more about in the media. David, anything you want to add to this item and what we're trying to, the scope of it?
Yeah, good morning. I mean, really, this is in response to Commissioner Edwards' request for more updates and information on sort of what's happening in the county specifically. So really grateful to have both law enforcement and the coroner's office there. I'll provide some data updates from our end on what we're seeing, and maybe a brief summary of some of the work that our department's doing in that regard.
Commissioner Edwards?
I guess my only question was, I know in preparing for this, the question was asked, we know how many fentanyl deaths, overdose deaths are attributed to this problem from our coroner, but I think the coroner might have asked the state medical office what the statewide numbers were, and I believe was told those numbers aren't available to the coroner. They have to go through some other process, and that doesn't even make sense to me, why they would withhold those numbers from the public. Have I got that a little mixed up, David?
I've heard sort of a version of that as well. I don't have the details. I was hoping to follow up with the coroner's office just to make sure I understood what he was told directly. I know that there's data that our team should have to some degree, and then there's data the state has. I'm not sure about his inability to access them, and I'd love to follow up on that to see why that is.
That's it for me, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Okay, item 5 is permitting option for temporary food establishments. We are here, David's here, who wants to tell us what we're doing at this particular meeting on this particular topic?
Yeah.
I did watch the meeting last, so I heard the overview and kind of saw where things landed, so.
Yeah, so this is just, thank you. I'm Art Starry, the Environmental Health Division Director for Public Health and Social Services. And as you indicated, Commissioner Menser, last month, Sammy Berg gave a presentation on the temporary food vendor options for the pop-up food vendors is what we've been calling them. And so there was discussion about options. The staff presented a preferred option, and the board asked us to come back this month to kind of hopefully bring that to a resolution. So it's just a continued discussion on that, and we're hoping to receive direction from the board so we can develop the final policies to implement an option for the temporary food vendors who want to operate at different sites over the course of the year, and kind of running as a temporary event. So that's pretty much it.
So it sounds like this could be fairly short because you're not presenting the final option, you're just looking for the direction of the Board of Health to then go and.
Well, we are presenting, I guess, our preferred option, and that we discussed that last month. There are a few questions from board members about costs and we prepared a little bit of information to compare the current proposal to what has been happening in the past. There's some quick overview, but we do hope that the board will be able to provide us with some direction so that we can develop the policy to implement. We can develop the policy administratively. It doesn't need to come back to the board once you give us kind of direction on where you'd like us to go.
Because this was brought to our attention by a user group, I guess is the best way to refer to it as, will we have the opportunity to hear from that user group at this presentation?
We can certainly let the one vendor who kind of brought this to your attention, let him know about this. I believe he already does know, and Commissioner Mensah has been in, not Commissioner Mensah, Commissioner Mejia has been in contact with him, but we'll certainly let him know about that. We've worked with him directly to let him know about this proposal.
I guess that's my preferred way of moving forward on this is the issue was brought to us by the community. We're gonna hear about the solution we've come up with, and it'd be kind of nice if the community actually said, yeah, thank you, we brought this forward and we agree, this is a good solution. Or they might say, well, we can't afford this solution, or whatever. I think it'd be valuable for the board to hear from the affected community, that's all.
So we can close that loop certainly, and I believe Sammy has already done that, but we can provide that information to you next week.
Okay, thank you.
And if the vendor is present, would you like to give him the floor to?
Well, I'd like to hear from him, yeah, I really would. I mean, the way this was brought forward, I mean, we've been working on it, trying to solve a community problem, and let's hear what the
To hear
community.
firsthand?
Yeah, here,
Yeah, if we can, if there is a possibility.
if one of the folks wanna do
So if you
it.
could communicate that we welcome them to attend and we would be, and we would invite input if they wanted to give it. So that,
Yeah, we can certainly do that. We will do that.
because that may, incentivize their attendance or not, knowing that we're gonna allow that option.
Yeah, just the option is worth knowing. that
Or,
everybody's
yeah,
gonna do
or
it.
they can just listen along and they don't have to say anything if they don't
Say-
want to. Okay, next item is noxious weed prescriptions.
So I think this will be mine again, and Mike Murphy is also here with Public Works. And so last month, we also had a presentation from Patrick Soderberg about the county's integrated pest management policy and how prescriptions for different pests are developed, how they're reviewed by the Pest and Vegetation Management Advisory Committee, how they come to the board, what the Board of Health's authority is on, or responsibilities are in those matters. And that was in preparation for these prescriptions that are coming to the board in March. And in this case, there's it's fairly straightforward, I think, because these are noxious weeds that the county's obligated to develop measures to control them. And so, but nonetheless, the process requires the Board of Health to review and approve these prescriptions. And so that's what this is to review the different pests, or in this case, the noxious weeds that are being considered for prescriptions, how they, the obligations the county has under state law to control them, how pest control prescriptions were developed and reviewed, and then ultimately the recommendations of the Pest and Vegetation Management Advisory Committee for the board regarding these prescriptions. And in this case, the PIVMAC, that's that advisory committee, agrees that these are good prescriptions and they should be approved. And so Mike will be presenting this information along with the assistance of Patrick Soderberg, because he's the expert on the county's integrated pest management policy and how in the review process. So again, these are coming to the board for approval for use by the Public Works Noxious Weed Program.
Question, Commissioners?
When this comes in front of us, will we have an opportunity to compare expenses of using, I don't know, one product over the other. I realize that we're gonna always stay within the bounds of the state. The state has restrictions. I mean, we can't use certain things that the state says you can't use. But do we have options in there that, this one will cost $20,000 to implement along the road? This one will cost $100,000 to implement along the road. So we can have some kind of comparison. Oftentimes on these briefings, I guess I've asked questions and well, we didn't really look into that. And I'm trying to make sure that we can compare the actuality of budget issues that go along with this. Because I know early on, it's like, I don't know, that was about 6 years ago, I think we did something like this and had some comparisons. I mean, like one of the things was, well, we can hand control this particular problem. That's gonna cost us 100,000, or we can use X that the state allows to be used on this particular problem. And that's gonna cost us $2,000. So just kind of a comparison.
Well, I can let Mike speak to that, but the prescriptions do provide options, and they do have, depending upon the magnitude of the problem, then that dictates the method of control that would be utilized. So if there's just a few noxious weeds that could be, we'll say, picked by hand or manually controlled, then that's the preferred option. On the other hand, if they get to a point where more broader control is necessary, then that's when pesticides can be used. And the prescriptions do indicate actually some different choices that can be considered for the use of pesticides. And I don't know that there's a substantial difference in cost between one pesticide or the other. Mike would know that. But again, the whole county policy for IPM is to use the kind of the least damaging methods first. And so if you have a small problem and it can be dug up by hand, and these are going to be on private property, by the way, a lot of this, then that's what you do. And then if they are broad enough, or that I should say more widespread enough, the injury level is high enough, then pesticides can be used, or then the next option. And again, there are choices that to be made by the noxious weed folks as to which one they choose. But Mike can talk about that if you'd like.
Sure, that's all correct. And these 5 different species that I'm going to talk about, they're newly present in the county. So everything is in low numbers. One of them, there's only 12 sites, and that's the most. And so at this point, they are being manually controlled. And so I'm going to go through all of those options for each of the 5 species.
Okay. I'm just looking for comparisons. That's all.
Okay.
And I know corporate entities oftentimes are allowed to use their own thing on their own place, doing their own thing. And maybe we've got property right next to that and we're restricted to this or that. That's what I'm looking for, a kind of a balance here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is appointment of alternate.
Thank you, and I've got to duck out to another meeting.
Okay, thanks, Art. Alternate health officer appointment. Director Bain.
Yeah, in the past, pre-pandemic, the board at times would offer a resolution to provide basically a backup health officer in case health officer was unavailable. I don't believe the board's done this since COVID, but as we're moving into a little bit more routine, we do expect our health officer to be able to maybe take vacations occasionally, or if she's otherwise incapacitated. I know, right? And so this resolution would authorize basically a backup plan. I'll note that in this case, what's unique or different is the state a couple of years ago created a regional health system or setup for public health. And there are 4 regional medical officers in the state. In our region, that medical officer is Dr. Jay Miller, who started last year. The point of these folks is actually to provide backup for health officers across the state. And so I wanted to make sure that we have a pathway to allow him to be a backup in case Dr. Abdimalik is not available.
Constituent out there, I'm sorry.
I think you had a quick.
Okay, so, and Mr. Miller, Dr. Miller is on board and fully understands that we're gonna be appointing him as a backup?
Yep, he is aware.
I'm good with that. Everything's okay.
Okay, sounds like we're good on that one. And that leaves one item, a substantive item, which is fiscal subcommittee. And there is an action here, although we may or may not take that action. David, do you want to outline the goal, or I can chime in as well?
I was gonna turn it to you on that one, Chair.
So there's been discussion about, and I think our resolution provides for the potential for Board of Health subcommittees. We're not 100% sure how many we need or how they're going to work. So we're going to start with the one we know we're going to need and see how it works, and then we can add ones later as necessary. But the fiscal one is really, we promised Board of Health members we wouldn't be hitting them with the complex foundational public health decisions and recommendations at the tail end of the year. We'd be working a little bit more methodically through it. So that and any other issues that may involve funding and budgetary recommendations, we thought the fiscal, calling it fiscal, we can change the name of that, finance, fiscal subcommittee, budget, whatever, would be a good place to start. So I think this item is really intended to just raise that issue and ask for some volunteers, or at least get people thinking, maybe give, if there aren't, I think 3 members was the idea. There's 7 of us, so if 3 folks wanna, we could move forward, or we could, delay it, but it's to initiate the conversation about the creation of this financial subcommittee, which we really like to have operating later in the spring or early summer on the, if nothing else, the foundational public health.
We definitely want to get them going, so they've
Yeah.
got a little time to understand the complicated nature of funding for.
We know that scheduling is gonna, I know that it's like starting this conversation is important because we need to identify our subcommittee members and then get them
Right.
scheduled and when they're gonna meet. And then, that's gonna take some time. So that's what this is about. Could be a short item. Any discussion will be wide open for the group. Anybody who wants to preliminarily volunteer would be great, and we'll take it from there. Any questions on this?
I guess my only question might be of Robin, is both of us sat through that training for, and I was kind of surprised that subcommittees are subject to.
Subcommittees are subject to OPMA is what we
Yeah.
discovered.
Right,
So.
and so I don't
even
know
though
how
it's
we're gonna
less than a
address
quorum,
that.
well, we'll just post special meeting notices and,
We just wanna
do
keep
what we
ahead
need
of it,
to
is
do.
all I'm saying,
yep.
as we move
And
forward.
most likely those subcommittee meetings will be held in this room, and this room is open to the public.
Yeah, okay, just as long as we kind of make note of it, because it was kind of a surprise to me.
It was a huge surprise to me.
Or virtual, yeah, we'll advertise that if it's a, thank you. If it's a virtual meeting, anybody can watch that.
Okay, so that'll take care of that. We'll have a report from Dr. Abdimalik and, if our director wants to give any, follow-up, back cleanup there, you'll be given the floor to do that, and then we'll adjourn. Anything else?
No, that sounds great.
Okay. Then, let's knock on maybe a couple more items out before we take a recess. Next on the agenda is number 5, proclamations and awards. Clerk of the board, anything we need to address? I know we kind of hammered out a schedule.
So I've included in your packet today for review was the September 5th proclamation draft. There was a request from the city of Tenino to make a proclamation for First Responders Day. So the draft you currently have incorporates some of the proclamation requests from Tenino to help prevent from making a double proclamation on the same day. For boards and commissions, the standing requests for the Boundary Review Board and Black Lake Special Districts have been included for your review. There are also reappointment requests from the Agricultural Advisory Committee and an appointment request for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. The special district was supposed to meet yesterday to review further recruitment outreach, and I'm still waiting for an update from them on that. The Ag Committee does plan to review the reappointment request at their next meeting on the 16th and provide a recommendation after that. I also recently received notification from the Housing Authority and Hotel Motel Commissions that they have departing members. So the Housing Authority has a member that decided to retire as of February 28th. Staff contact informed me that they have 3 people interested in the commission, and I have received confirmation from 2 applicants from the end of last year that they're still interested as well. The commission has requested the board hold off on an appointment decision to give them time to meet with the people that are interested and see if any of them decide to apply. But I have included the applications from those interested, and I'm hoping to have any new ones by next week. The Hotel Motel Commission has an opening because a previous member got moved to a new location outside the county and is no longer eligible to serve. The commission met on February 27th, reviewed the nominee, and they are recommending appointment. I also touched base with the staff contact for the Board of Equalization for the member that they have that has an expired term to see if she was possibly interested in applying for reappointment. But in talking with the contact, I found out that there was some miscommunication back in 2021 when the member reapplied for reappointment and didn't know that the board took action to reappoint her in May of that year. So her term doesn't actually expire until 2024. So I did send her an appointment letter apologizing for the miscommunication and confusion, and I'm working with the staff to get the roster information updated online. Outside of any questions, that's all I have.
Okay, that was a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, I missed one thing, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
And maybe more, but, the Black Lake Special District, could you cover that one again?
Yeah, so they had their meeting, they were supposed to have a meeting on February 20th that they didn't have a quorum for, so they canceled that. They met yesterday, and I reached out this morning, and they did reach back out to let me know they did meet yesterday, had further discussion, and are going to get me a recap later on today, so I don't have an update as to what other outreach efforts they have made.
Thank you.
Okay, so in general, I'd say if there's not a burning issue, we should wait for Commissioner Mejia to weigh in, because I see some new names.
Yep.
But like I see the SWAC, it's an appointment from Bucota that we really don't have discretion. So should we, and I know that's important to get those folks seated, so we
Yeah, I can get
put
that
them on
added.
for the 14th, or
Yeah, it's
Sure.
procedural.
then Commissioner Mejia can weigh in next week if she has a concern. Housing Authority, I have a question. So the first 2 names there were people who applied last time.
Yes.
The third name is a new name.
Yes.
But then you said there were 3 people.
I believe she is one of the 3 that they were speaking with.
Yeah, and so one of their 3 has applied and the other 2 might or might not.
Yes, I'm hoping that if there is an application to be submitted, that I might have some new ones next week.
Okay, so we can address that next week. Now, Pamela Johnson, Hotel Motel, was that the one where you said,
They had, one of the
They moved out
members
of
got
the
moved to
area
a
or something?
different location, so they're outside of Thurston County. So they're just asking that, the Ms. Johnson be appointed in that person, be appointed to replace that person, because she does qualify to serve on the committee there, or the commission.
okay, and is this? I know a Pamela Johnson, I'm wondering if it's the same person. Okay, but that's not something we can address that next week, okay. And then okay, Boundary Review Board, all right, so that's kind of gets us where we need to go.
Perfect.
We'll move forward on solid waste next week, and then there'll be more to come next week on this other, okay. Okay, what's next? Let's go with PIO check-in, item 7.
Good morning, Commissioners. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor. Last Wednesday, our new website went live, and we've received some positive feedback and some questions about finding stuff because it's set up much differently than the old system. So if people are struggling finding the information, the new search bar works great. The old one didn't work because it was multiple different systems put together. Now the new one works really, really well. So if somebody's struggling finding something, try searching before reaching out and saying you can't find something, because it actually works, which is good. And then I officially want to welcome Anna Rhodes, our new public information specialist. We're very excited to have her on board. We're going to be restarting the Friday 5, the first Friday in April. So she's already working on that. The Insider, which is the internal newsletter, it's a quarterly newsletter. We plan to have the first edition out mid-April. She's going to start doing news clippings again, so we will be sending those back out again and getting those out to you. And then she's also prepared a news release announcing the advisory boards and commissions that were accepting applications with a focus on the Ag Committee ex officio student member or youth member and the Boundary Review Board. So that's going to go out tomorrow. Pending any questions, that's what I have for you.
Fair Board's always, has a lot of vacancies too, so if you can,
Maybe we can highlight that one next month or something on social media since it's getting close to the fair time.
Commissioner Edwards, anything on that?
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Should we break before legislative up? Okay, we'll take 12 minutes. We'll come back at 10:30 to address the legislative update. Okay, it's 10:35 a.m. We're back to our Board of County Commissioners agenda setting. And we are picking up with item 8, legislative update. County manager has a new tracker for us.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Here's, I give you a revised report. This report will be significantly changed, for next week. As of tomorrow, March 8th, is the deadline for any bills to pass the House of Origin. So there will be a lot of bills that may be moving forward, and a lot of bills that will die as we know it. I'd like to highlight a couple of items that might be interested as we have been going through this process. And our first page is House Bill 1022. That is our bill. It is held in committee, and we're doing just about everything that we can to make sure it goes to puts on the House floor for a vote. The chances are very slim at this point, but we're working with Everett to make sure that that is the case. And again, the deadline for that is tomorrow. Also, on page number 1, House Bill 1049 at the bottom of page 1. And that is really the updating timelines, adopting the county commissioners boundary districts as more procedural to align with the requirements when we submitted that to the county auditor. It gives more flexibility in time for the county auditor to process that. That passed the House, it has moved to the Senate, and that had, it was a unanimous by the House, so no issues on that one. Moving on to page 2, and that is House Bill 1133. That is the accessory dwelling units the Commissioner Edwards was asking. The companion bill on the Senate Bill 5357 is dead, but the House Bill 110 has not been pulled out of our rules. And again, it will face the same deadline of tomorrow. It doesn't come to the House floor for a vote. Another item to highlight is on page number 4. There you go. Page number 4, third from the top, House Bill 1670. And that is a House bill that raises the 1% limit on the property taxes. This has been support by WASAC. And in fact, we just received an email from WASAC encouraging all the legislative authorities to send an email to the to encourage to bring this up for a vote on the floor. So I have prepared already a letter with Katie as assistance. If you, with your concurrence, is a form letter that we have worked with WASAC. With your concurrence, we'll send that letter before noon today. And again, is asking to move this bill out of our rules and put it in the House vote before tomorrow. So with your concurrence, we will send that, since the position that we have taken as a county is in support. Just want to let you know. Moving on down on the same page, on page 4, is Senate Bill 5067. And that is concerning the meetings of the county legislative authorities. That has give you more flexibility as when the board can meet. And that always is always a welcome flexibility. It passed the Senate, is moving to the House, and I believe the Senate voted unanimously on this bill.
What to do exactly?
Allows you to have more meetings without going through special meetings. Allows you to have meetings outside of the county seat, within the boundaries of the board, of the county. So it gives you more flexibility in that.
Like what we ran into in Rochester that time.
It really gives us more flexibility, obviously, with the OPMA requirements. And the last, on the last page, Senate, I want to highlight one more. Sorry, on page 4, before you move on. Halfway, that is the engross substitute House Bill 1705. And that's the stormwater control facilities. And that is related to the ditch districts requirement. The companion bill, Senate Bill 5645, is dead in the Senate. However, 1705 is moving forward with amendments. It most likely will pass the House, and I don't know how that will move into the Senate. From what it was, this bill, to what it is right now, is significantly different. The initial bill, we were opposed last year and continue to be at the beginning of this year, requested for counties to provide 7 years of back pay to ditch districts on stormwater fees. That has been taken out. And working with WASAC, and through those amendments has softened some of the language. Now what this bill does is allows for the county to notify only the ditch districts and as to when we're planning to do improvements within the boundaries related to stormwater without having any financial obligation behind it. So that has been a successful process. So that is moving forward. And the last bill that I want to highlight.
So we're no longer opposed to it? Is that what you're saying?
No, we'll continue to oppose it.
Does it still give them the stormwater fees going forward?
No stormwater fees. Only is it if the county enters into an agreement with the ditch district for the ditch district to manage the operations and maintenance of the new stormwater facility. If that's through a local agreement, at that point is where the county will give them the stormwater fees. That makes it, but it has to be.
It's not likely to, yeah.
At least
What
from.
are we opposed to in the new version?
Yeah, they oppose because prior to this amendments that just occurred in the last 2 days.
Yeah, oh, I know we were opposed to it then, but why now?
Yeah, we can change it to neutral. And when Deborah Manguia asked me, what is the position, at this point it's neutral, but we haven't got a chance to. Yeah. Okay. On the last page. Two bills, the bottom two is Senate, substitute Senate Bill 5627. That is related to the formation of salary commissions within the counties. That passed the Senate unanimously and is moving to the House. And the last bill that I'd like to highlight as Senate Bill 5638, that was related to the lake management districts. That bill is dead. Unless you have any questions, we will go ahead and submit that letter related to House Bill 1670 in support of bringing this bill to the House floor for a vote. That's my report, sir.
Anything? Okay. Let's move to item 9, which is a follow-up on a public hearing that we had Wednesday last week about agriculture activities in critical areas. Yeah, February 28th was a public hearing. Ashley Arai is present, who is the staff lead on that item. And I think Commissioner Edwards, you had some questions or you wanted to slow the process down. So we're just touching back in on that.
I think I met with Ashley last week and I'm good to go.
Good to go, okay.
Okay, so the next step is, with your consideration, is to bring a formal item for you to approve this. So this is just a check-in point. So you will see an AIS where you consider approving the code amendments for 818.
Josh, Ashley, anything you need to add before we move on?
No, I appreciate it.
I just wanted to, real quick, can I just jump in real quick and express my appreciation to the Planning Commission on the unanimous vote and to the board for taking this next step for this action. This is just one small piece of the puzzle in helping farmers in our area. And thank you to Ashley and her team for the great work on getting this moved forward. So it's another step, but thank you for the consideration.
Commissioner Edwards.
I'd just like to thank Ashley for all her hard work on this. Thank you.
So you will see an AIS in the upcoming board meeting for you to consider approving this.
Okay. Takes us to Commissioner item number 1, treatment sales tax, TMBH ASO interlocal agreement. Carrie Hennon is here.
I will give the floor to Carrie Hennon. So go ahead, Carrie.
Good morning, Commissioners. Carrie Hennon, Public Health and Social Services, Treatment Sales Tax. Here today with some updates about the Treatment Sales Tax interlocal agreement with the TMBH ASO, Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization. So we will need to amend this agreement in 2023 and wanted to have a couple items on your radar screen before actually putting an AIS on the agenda. So kind of big picture, the county has an interlocal agreement with the ASO. We've written a 2-year agreement in 2022. The budget was close to over $2.9 million. They spent about $2.8 million of that. So they are expending these funds. This agreement, the scope of the agreement covers about 13 different programs, services in the jail, community-based programs, programs for kids, programs for adults. So big agreement with kind of a lot of moving parts. Because there's so many moving parts, writing a 2-year agreement means, of course, we had changes. So of course we need to make an amendment in the 2nd year. So for 2023, the sort of biggest piece that we need to amend relates to an action that you took through the midterm budget adjustment process. You added a little more than $500,000 to the funding that we can put into this agreement with the ASO to fund jail services, some jail reentry services, and some backfill for the loss of True Blood funds. So that's sort of the number one reason we need to amend this agreement for 2022. There's also some kind of smaller changes, a little bit of shifts of money around to account for some programs that have decreased costs, some programs that have increased costs, but sort of, all adding up to the same amount, some smaller changes in kind of scope, language, performance, etc. The question that we wanted to bring before you today would relate to basically moving some money that had been set aside in the public health budget over to this interlocal agreement with the ASO. So one of the programs funded by TST through this interlocal agreement is called Wraparound with Intensive Services. This is a youth program known as WISE for short. And the cost of that program is increasing. This is a program that is kind of due to a class action lawsuit years ago, is required to be provided around the state for Medicaid youth. The state hires an actuary to set a rate, a per kid per month rate. That rate is increasing for Medicaid youth, and we need to match that rate for non-Medicaid youth, which is what TST is funding. So to maintain the same capacity, the same number of slots, the cost of that is about $154,000. I am strongly supportive of this because this is a intensive mental health program for kids. There's always a wait list, and yet they are always, they've always been able to spend these funds. They've been able, knock wood, to maintain staffing and provide services. So instead of coming to you with a request in the upcoming budget amendment, the thought here is to, again, sort of shift some funds that are in the public health TST budget over to this interlocal agreement with the ASO. The kind of reason for anticipated underspending in the public health TST budget is because the board had set aside quite a bit of funding for LEAD, law enforcement assisted diversion. We have not needed to spend TST funds on LEAD yet, and we anticipate that in 2023 we will need to continue to not need as much as the board had set aside. So the the money, broadly speaking, is in public health's budget, and can be shifted from the public health side to the ASO side. The mechanism for that, again, would be the amendment of this interlocal agreement, but wanted to sort of flag that we are shifting money around in a different way than the board's original, I think, kind of intention in the adoption of the biennial budget a year and a half ago. Was that a good summary?
Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm just always confused. You said amend for 2022 when you first started. Did you mean amend for 2023?
Yes, sorry, sorry if so we have written a 2-year agreement, so maybe I misspoke. So there's a 2022-2023 agreement we need to amend for 2023.
Okay, and then there's 100,000 left from the 13 programs that ASO is using now, and we're gonna use that money to go towards that 154, or?
No.
Not exactly. So I think because you adopt the budget on a year by year basis, the 2022 ship has sailed, so to speak. So any underspending from last year really just reverts to the TST fund balance.
Back in the fund, so.
Yes. And so for 2023, we think in the public health budget, we have sufficient budget authority. It's just sort of the moving from the public health side to this ASO interlocal agreement. And I know, I think I heard Robin's voice, so she may be able to frame it better than I can.
You've done an excellent job, thank you. But I will say, for the board, Carrie, do you have an approximate how much the total public health budget is from TST? Roughly?
Probably close to $5 million. I'd have to.
$5 million. So,
numbers.
nope, that's great. So public health has approximately 5 million in TST. Of that amount, about half, a little more than half, goes to the BHASO, and the remaining stays within public health to spend on a variety of things, including LEAD. They don't need the LEAD money this year because of the grant. We're continuing to get a grant that we didn't anticipate would get extended. So what Carrie is suggesting is you take the amount of money that's not needed for LEAD, shift it to the BHO. The public health budget stays at 5 million, that doesn't change. The board approves a contract amendment. In the long term, I think that, not in 2023, but maybe 24, maybe 25, eventually you're gonna need TST money for LEAD, because the grant won't last forever. So you're making what I think you need to take the long view. You're making a long-term commitment, because the price won't go down for the WISE program. So it's a long-term commitment to the BHASO, with the thought in mind that eventually you may need to increase the public health budget to cover LEAD. But there's so much money in this fund. I encourage you, this is an excellent plan that Carrie has proposed, and I encourage you to approve it.
And does the 154 solve the problem for young people that are having problems?
Sounds like there's a backlog, and in your upcoming budget, you may want to consider more for this purpose, but there's a lot of things to consider out of TST.
Okay, good, I'm good.
So when you said the money's not needed because of a grant, but the grant, at least how it was originally constructed, was we were using TST for our 25% match for that grant. So how can we just shift out?
We had anticipated that the grant would end. So additional TST money was put in the budget to cover the entire cost of LEAD. the grant got extended.
Oh.
So this doesn't take all of the TST money out of LEAD, only a portion of it that's not needed this year.
We had over budgeted, not knowing about the grant extension.
Exactly.
And Carrie, you said, you said, we anticipate not needing the TST money for LEAD in the future. And I'm wondering how you know that, because I've had a couple conversations the last couple of days, and it doesn't seem to be clear how much is coming from behavioral navigators, how long that LEAD grant's gonna last, and where everything will land after all that.
So if I said that, I said it too broadly. What I meant to say was we anticipate not needing the full amount in 2023 that the board has already set aside. So the board had set aside $540,000 in TST funding in this year. My understanding from Marianne O'Gara, the projections based on the current grant is that we wouldn't need more than $220,000 of local funds in the current year. I think the bigger picture questions without a crystal ball make it really hard to say, well, what will we need for LEAD? What will the ASO need for all these other programs? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in this system. Sorry?
If you guys are saying that we overlapped, essentially, anticipating the end of the grant, we overlapped the grant, and that's a lot clearer than, I'm more comfortable with that than saying, well, we're predicting where LEAD's gonna go. You know what I'm saying? Like that we're not gonna need it, or it's not gonna grow, or we're not gonna, so I guess I'm good for this piece, and then we still have to figure out the future.
Exactly. So, which is why I was talking about, when you take the long-term view, you're probably gonna need this money at the BHASO, and you'll probably also need funding for LEAD, but that's
Right, but my point was,
the budget view in the future.
if this extra money was only there because of, LEAD didn't use it because something going on in Trinity to LEAD, like that would make me nervous, because that could change, right? And I mean, as that program grows and law enforcement gets more involved, et cetera, versus saying, we actually budgeted, we overlapped the budget essentially. So to be preparing for if the grant ended, and then so that's a lot easier decision from my perspective.
Romero's had his.
Yeah, sorry, County Manager.
Not necessarily a question related to this particular item before you, Commissioners, but I think it's before the county and the board considers moving forward on a long-term LEAD, it is appropriate to have a briefing related to where we are in implementing the program. As you heard in many meetings, most of the referrals are civil referrals, where law enforcement referrals are minimum. And I think we need to get to a conversation whether that really meets the intent of this grant, which is law enforcement diversion program. And what are the risks associated with that? And I'm not here to undermine the success of this program. That's not my point. I want to make sure that perhaps the board is fully aware. The initial grant, when we applied, it was specifically related to law enforcement diversion program. We have shifted into more civil referrals, where law enforcement is not part of that process. So I think more conversation needs to occur, whether the board would like to continue to fund this program in the long term. I think that maybe future conversations happen.
I would suggest that we keep in mind that it's not just black and white, law enforcement, civil. Now that we've created the scout team, the mobile outreach team in Lacey, the crisis response unit, now, because I just had a conversation with the sheriff about this yesterday, I was asking him the same question. Why are the law, if let's just take the sheriff. If the sheriff gets a call and no one's alleging a serious criminal incident, but there's a crisis situation, before the scout team was there, it might be an officer that would have responded, and that might have turned into a law enforcement referral. Now they've got the resource, because we funded it, for a different type of response, the scout team. And that scout team may connect up to lead. And that may, in your terminology, may be considered a civil referral because law enforcement themselves never got responded. It was never a criminal investigation. But in the absence of these bridge units that connects the non-criminal and the criminal, that would have been a criminal referral. So we need to look at how we're changing our system holistically. I'm very comfortable if we need to, I want to see increased referrals from the law enforcement or the law enforcement, bridge units, I'm calling them, like the scout team, or the mobile outreach team in Lacey. To me, that's still accomplishing the purpose of LEAD, because it's taking something that, in the absence of all of that, would have resulted in arrest. And if you just did the scout team with no LEAD, they would deal with the crisis in the moment, and then the next day or 2 days later, law enforcement would be back there and they'd be booked into jail. So there is a complicating factor here when we talk about civil versus law enforcement referrals, and we need to sort of make sure we're looking at the full picture.
Yeah, and again, as I stated, I'm not here to argue the validity of the program, how it's moving forward. That is not my intent, because we need that. I just want to make sure that we are aligned with the requirements of the grant.
Sure.
That we don't put ourselves in a financial situation, perhaps we have to return the money. That is really my point. And also, if the value added, as you stated, moving forward, then is the board who needs to determine where and how it needs to be funded. But I think it's good a check-in point on a briefing. And also, I think we need to extrapolate in terms of, out of those referrals, what is next? What is next to those individuals who have been referred to what programs and what the success factors of that will be? Because, I think we will be remiss if we just count the number of referrals, whether civil or law enforcement, without understanding what are the next steps of the positive outcome of the interception.
The other so there's two more complicating factors. One, and I mentioned this, is the Behavioral Health Navigators was passed last year. They specifically said every region has to create this, and if you've got a LEAD program, you can supplement your LEAD program. So there's another funding stream that may have other parameters around it that are different than the original grant. Thirdly, there's a bill that I understand just yesterday was passed the Senate about a Blake Fix bill that specifically talks about referrals to LEAD, specifically calls it out. Now, I don't know if there's a fiscal note with there or there's any funding to come that, but if you're a county that doesn't have LEAD, and here's this law that says law enforcement is supposed to refer to LEAD, it's implied to me that there's gonna potentially be funding to support LEAD across the state, if that's the direction they're going with the Blake. Keep our eye on that as well.
It's the same bill as that you described, I'm tracking that doesn't have the fiscal note.
It doesn't, I've got
So then it becomes somewhat of an unfunded mandate.
5536.
Yeah, I'll double check to see if it's the same bit.
Highly encourages referrals to LEAD and diversion. None of us, in the conversation I was having, none of us knew if there was financial element to it.
Highly encourages is not a mandate. So the hope that funding would come with that type of language is.
If I was a county commissioner in a county that couldn't afford a LEAD program, and I got, and the state passed that law, I'd be front and center saying, well, I wanna do what you're asking us to do, but my police officers can't refer to LEAD because we don't have it and we can't afford it.
Right? Gotcha.
So.
I'm not arguing that, but as a devil's advocate,
Yeah.
right? And having spent many years seeking funding from the legislature, they would not see that.
I'm just
as
throwing
a
it out
mandate.
there. I just heard about this yesterday, so.
It is the precursor of moving forward, though. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, we keep.
And that was my question. You articulated my whole concern. I mean, very well, I might add, that because there's no way we can differentiate once it gets to the court what it was, what it originally would have been.
Right.
Had there not been the leads.
I'm gonna echo what Romero has already said. No one is arguing the value of the program as it's operating in Thurston County. not Romero, not me. However, I will say that if we have a grant, that grant is going to have a definition for lead, and that's what the state is going to base that particular pot of money on. So that's what we'll be reviewing.
When we went through the setup, and I wasn't part of all the subcommittee meetings and stuff, I was only hearing about it at the higher level, but when we were going through the very meticulous process with the 3 different subcommittee policy, is a policy, community advisory, we're getting technical assistance from the lead, because we got the grant, we had technical advisories from Seattle and national lead. We were starting it with a lot of social referrals. So I mean, I
I
can't.
think it was if I may, with all the respect, it was the reverse, it was law enforcement. We started with law enforcement and they evolved into more, my words, civil referrals.
They call them social referrals.
Sort of
They
referrals,
call them.
yeah. So
And-
I may need to change my terminology.
And in this world, I mean, and the terminology matters actually, because it's not just whether there's an officer there or not, because officers, as I understood it, officers can do social referral. What social referral means is somebody's not committing an active crime.
Right.
They're doing, but, they need, but it's identified by whoever, a police officer or anyone else, that they need some services of different kinds. That's what they call social referral. The law enforcement is where this person is committing crime and like I could arrest them right now and take them to jail, but I'm gonna choose a different.
And you divert them off, out of jail. That's, right? So, more to come.
You just gotta look at the contract.
Well, even when we do that, though, the definition, we're gonna have to, maybe we'll have to explain that definition, because all of those issues would have been law enforcement eventually. So we just interceded.
Right.
We followed the intent of the law.
And it's funny, because that's the argument. I was in a conversation with this yesterday. I was like, that's the argument. And I was arguing more of the side like, well, I get that, but that's harder for me to just like, if we're gonna make a major expenditure and justify the public, someone that would have been arrested right there, it's easier for us to quantify the value of that, right? Like that would have been this many days in jail and this many, like, to say that like down the chain, that person probably would have ended up in the system. It's a little more speculative and it's harder.
Yeah, that's hard to,
Cost
harder to put a
avoidance is
dollar-
one of the hardest things to
that's
estimate.
hard to determine, you're right. I mean, even on the social referrals, they said, if, without that intercept, that individual will be ended up in the justice system, hard to determine.
Probably, but it's hard to say
Hard to
what
determine.
So is this a good topic for one of our JRT meetings, or should we set up a separate briefing on it?
I think the board needs to get a briefing on the whole program.
A separate briefing, all right, well, I'll work with Jamie to
Because
find
on the JRT, we have we have updates on the lead.
Right.
Yeah, it's part of the whole process, yeah, but I think is a little bit different focus for the board, if I may,
Yep.
to see the program.
So I'll work with Jamie to get something on the calendar, it'll probably be May at this rate.
And Leah is also,
Leah too, of course.
Yeah, not knowing this whole
And
conversation
working
was
with David.
happening, I actually asked Leah yesterday can you pull together kind of the funding? I mean, I basically already asked for all of this, what you guys were talking about from Leah, because I personally wanted to understand where the funding sits. What grants expiring when, what behavioral navigator money is coming in, what the rules are about that, how many social referrals versus law enforcement referrals, we're
Since it's
operating on parallel
closely tied
tracks.
to money and grants, I will be looking into it as well, but
Yeah.
I'll connect with Leah, I'll work with Jamie to get something on the board's calendar, like I said, probably May is as early as we'll have an open work session time, but yeah, we'll work on all that.
so going back to Carrie's item, you will see an AIS coming on your board agenda that will, for you to consider an action on this contract.
Good to go on that, Commissioner Edwards. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
The next item is 10-2, which is courthouse renovation project cost estimate follow-up.
And this is a follow-up to the planning session that we had, where we presented, the plan, they were trying to implement as the direction of the board on the renovations of the courthouse campus. And the estimate that we presented to you and on the briefing was 50 million. And all the activities that were planning to, the presented to the board was based on that. 50 million. Commissioner Mejia raised some concerns that perhaps we're not going to be doing much of HVAC upgrades and so on and so forth. And we committed to bring, a larger estimate that includes that. Since Commissioner Mejia is not here today, I will bring this item again next Tuesday morning to ask for affirmation of the direction that were provided to us a few months ago. But anyway, so at this point, I leave it to give Robin to walk us through the differences between the estimates between the $50 million estimate versus I believe is the $82 million estimate, and how the difference between the two related to HVAC, lighting, water improvements.
Great. Thank you, Romero. So I'm gonna, the first page is a summary. I'm gonna skip the first page for a moment. I'm gonna come back to the first page.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Sure.
I wonder if getting into this at this point is fair to Commissioner Mejia not to get here.
Certainly wait until next week.
I mean, that's only because she was very concerned about some issues that we're gonna be talking about. And through no fault of her own, she can't be here today.
Of course.
So, I don't know, what do you think? I mean, I'd like to have her be.
Unless you're telling me that we needed to address this today,
I think if I may, maybe we could have Robin walk you through what this means. I'm not going to be asking you for direction. And we will make sure that Commissioner Mejia hears the same thing next Tuesday morning.
We can go in depth next week. If this morning I can just orient you to how to look at this worksheet.
we got time to do that. And she can always listen to it as well after and just catch up this
Absolutely.
little chunk.
Yep.
Okay.
Time for her.
Okay.
So I'm gonna flip past the summary page. I apologize, I see these pages do not have page numbers on them. But the second page is for building 1. And you can tell it's building 1. It says building 1 all the way at the bottom down here. Again, I apologize for the format, but, so the way to read this page is this is from the packet that you received last week. And this column, the total cost estimate, total estimated cost column, this is the cost for building 1 at the $50 million number. So the proposed cost of building 1, $6,559,862. The next column, total estimated cost at 82 million, building 1 would cost $11,793,414. And you clearly see the differences off to the side. So you can see the numbers that changed. The items that changed was there is significantly less money for plumbing. It's not no money for plumbing, it's less money for plumbing. Under the $82 million estimate, plumbing costs were to be $473,000, I'm rounding now. And under the 50 million, it's 140,000 for plumbing. For HVAC, it would have been 2.7 million. Under the lower estimate, 665,000. So you can see where things changed. I'd also like to point out that HVAC, plumbing, Fire and electrical were not the only changes. If you look at the line that is for interior construction, that's C10, that also went down somewhat in the lower estimate. So the point I'm trying to get at, that you can see on this page, is that infrastructure were not the only things that were reduced, and they weren't eliminated in the lower cost estimate. And that's how to read each of these pages, and then there's a summary on the front page.
Line C30, the interior finishes also has a significant
Right,
change.
finishes were
And
reduced
that's where
somewhat.
we reduce the tenant improvements.
You'll see in some of these buildings, like electrical wasn't reduced at all, or fire wasn't reduced at all. So you can go building by building and see exactly what changed between these estimates.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes. It looks like we're not treating, I don't know, everything equal, I might say. Under electrical, okay, for the lower cost one, it was 676. For the higher cost one, it was 967,000.
Right.
And I don't know what 904,000 means
We would-
off to the
We would need
side.
to get Tom in here to explain what that column is.
And, but there's quite a few that go along here. I mean, like on the HVAC, it talks about, it shows for the lower one, 665, but the higher one is 2.7 million. So how come that doesn't show off to the side as differences?
We'll have to ask Tom, the project manager, exactly what
Because
this additive.
Those additives to the.
Okay, I mean, but there's several
Right.
categories here that need.
That
Well,
don't
well,
have an additive.
Yeah,
right.
and a good example of that is, for instance, on B30.
Yes.
In
Okay.
in both instances, on the $50 million budget and the $83 million, we're not planning to replace the roof. But if we were to replace the roof, that will be an additional
Well,
$677,000.
that would be on
Correct.
top of the 82 million.
Right, that will be on top of the 82 million.
I got you.
That's how perhaps you may want to read this report.
What was it, what's the 15 for? Just some tar to dump on there or something?
Yeah, it really was, as I understand it, it was just major, small fixes on the roof to accommodate the changes on the HVAC.
Okay, okay. So I think with all these changes, I really do think it's crucial that Commissioner Mejia hear
We'll
this,
bring that
this
up.
whole thing.
Yeah.
And to come with those kind of, with
Yeah.
Tom or whomever and show those differentiating amounts in comparison between 50 and 80.
Again, I apologize for the formatting of this worksheet.
Yep, well, I'll bring this up next week.
That's pretty useful, thank you.
I'm sorry, what?
So that's pretty useful, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, all right, so that takes us to other commissioner items.
Other commissioner items. I'm a little stumped yet on 1670. Is that a councilmatic thing or a vote thing? What is that?
It is an option for the legislative authority to increase from 1% limit, maximum of 3% based on inflation. There is a
Nothing,
calculation
but no vote required?
of the people.
Yeah.
No, it's councilmatic.
So is this gonna be signed by the chair,
Yes.
this letter?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to remain consistent, that's all, so.
But this, remember, this
That's
is
fine.
an option, is not a mandate.
Right, it is an option, but I'd like to, my preference is I'd like to see the option be available for the voters. I'm always kind of the voter guy. So anyway, that's okay. I mean, just as long as I just want to be able to make access to.
If you like, I can send that letter under my signature.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for the chair. She's not here, so see
Well,
what she's
and
got to
the
say.
chair is part of the LSE,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that request came through the
I'm
LSE.
sure that she sat on that, in on that discussion, so I want to give her the
Yeah,
the
WASAC
courtesy
is,
of.
WASAC is fully supportive of this.
Okay, that was maybe my issue.
You can give the option to the voters today.
Right, we already have that.
That's a levy lid lift.
Yeah, here's some other issues that, come in with me on that issue. So,
Yeah,
no, your shot.
I don't really have one that needs to be
Okay.
taken up today.
When might we, I'm just wondering if a few minutes, even next week, I mean, is there any chance we can have more time to go over this? Because it is quite a issue, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
And I get the sense the board's concerned about it, so.
But also we're moving forward on the previous direction of the board to start remodeling the courthouse campus. And as we stated in the past, we have an appointment with the, remember the name of this council at this
The Project Review Committee.
Project Review Committee on the 23rd of this month to give the county the authority to exercise the progressive design build project delivery method,
When is that meeting coming up?
March 23rd. We already submitted the application.
Is there some time this week that we can go over this?
I don't have a full board this week.
If I could get out of going to my insurance commission meeting, I'd do it.
Oh, you're just looking for an excuse not to travel.
That is true.
Pretty important stuff, Commissioner.
Look, I am looking for an excuse to not go. I don't, hell, it'd be my luck I get snowed in or something.
Where you headed?
Chelan?
Wenatchee.
Chelan or where is it?
I don't know, Chelan, Wenatchee.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's what's
No,
not
it isn't beautiful. It's in the winter. It's winter time. Okay, well, more to come, I guess, on it.
We'll make sure the board has enough time to review this.
Good? Yeah.
Okay, we'll be adjourned till 2 p.m.
Thank you.